Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start, may I take this time to remind everyone of our house rules and reminders for today's event. To our participants, please be respectful, avoid interrupting, making rude comments, or engaging in side conversations that are visible to everyone. During the Q&A, please use the Q&A chat box function and type your questions briefly and clearly. Participants are requested to virtually remain in the webinar until the end. We would also like to remind you that the webinar will be recorded and uploaded by the organizers. Participants will not be allowed to record. If you have any concerns or inquiries, you may direct them to the Q&A function. Lastly, please continue to observe proper decorum throughout the sessions. Regarding data privacy, the organizers strive to ensure a high level of security for your personal data. The organizers will comply with the Philippines Data Privacy Act, governing data that has been gathered as part of the registration process during this event and the evaluation. Good morning to all our participants who have joined us in today's event. Fax Asia warmly welcomes you to the webinar, Malaysia and the Philippines in ASEAN, Navigating Regional Challenges Together. This morning, we will explore the evolving dynamics of Malaysia-Philippines relations, particularly in light of emerging regional challenges. With geopolitical tensions rising, economic uncertainties lingering, and maritime disputes persisting, it is more critical than ever to explore how these two founding ASEAN members can reinforce regional stability while balancing their national interests. My name is Florence Principe Gamboa, Program Manager at Fax Asia. It is truly a privilege to be here with all of you today, and I'm very pleased to be your host and moderator. This discussion takes place at a critical moment as Malaysia and the Philippines navigate an increasingly complex regional landscape. Pressing questions arise about the future of ASEAN unity, maritime security, and strategic autonomy in the Indo-Pacific. With great power competition, economic uncertainties, and territorial disputes, Malaysia and the Philippines must recalibrate their approaches to diplomacy and security. Understanding how the two countries adopt to these issues is crucial for policymakers, academics, diplomats, and those invested in Southeast Asia's future. Our distinguished panel will discuss cooperation and competition, unity and divergence, and of course, the ever-present challenge of managing external power influences. To officially start today's webinar, may I call on Mr. Julio Amador III, founder and trustee of Fax Asia, for his opening remarks.
So I'm happy to have all of you here. And again, welcome to everyone. And thank you for joining us for I think this is the very first Malaysia seminar of our Malaysia program at Fax Asia. So maraming salamat po from all of us here at Fax Asia, and we look forward to the presentation and the discussion. Back to you, Florence.
Thank you, Sir July. We have 3 distinguished speakers today who will be given 15 minutes each to discuss their perspective and insights on regional and maritime security and the rapidly increasing importance of the semiconductor industry. Before I introduce them, may I request for a quick photo session with our speakers, Sir July, Dr. Shahadah, Captain Sebastian, and Dr. Leong. Please turn on your cameras. And Lisa, please let us know if you've taken a screenshot. Okay, now let us start this relevant discussion as I introduce our first speaker, Dr. Nur Shahadah. Dr. Nur Shahadah is the program convener of Fax Asia's Malaysia program. She is also a senior lecturer at the Institute of China Studies, University Malaya. She is concurrently a co-convener at the East Asian International Relations Caucus, a research platform for exchange, engagement, and empowerment among foreign affairs professionals in Malaysia. Her research concentrates on China's foreign policy, South China Sea, the Belt and Road Initiative, Southeast Asian security, and East Asian security affairs. Dr. Shahadah was a recipient of the Taiwan Fellowship and the Korea National Diplomatic Academy's ASEAN Fellowship. She served as a member of the writing team for the Government of Malaysia's Defense White Paper. Dr. Shahadah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Florence, for the excellent moderating so far. A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, before I begin, please allow me to take just a few seconds of your time so that I can express my sincere gratitude to Fax Asia for giving me this opportunity to speak in this webinar this morning. I'm truly honored to be here, and I'm really, really happy to be the convener for this Malaysian program. Today I'll be talking about Malaysia and also our approach in the South China Sea. And in talking about this topic, I think I would like to frame my discussion based on the three very important points that I would like to put forward. So the first point is that our approach in the South China Sea is unique in the sense that it is low profile, it is non-confrontational, it is diplomatic based, and most importantly, it is alliance allergic. So that's the first thing. And secondly, I would say that our approach is the best approach that serves our core stakes in the South China Sea at this point of time. And it is the most pragmatic one at the moment. And I'll explain why later on during my speech. And last but not least, is that this approach, although I say that it is the most pragmatic one, but it is not something static, meaning that it might change, you know, if and when China become more and more aggressive towards Malaysia in the South China Sea. And the reason why I say that our approach is unique is because it is very different from the approach taken by other claimant states in Southeast Asia. The Philippines, for instance, it's clear that your approach in dealing with China in the South China Sea is very much alliance-based and US-centric. For Vietnam, we all know that Vietnam has been adopting this openly defiant stance against China in the South China Sea whenever Hanoi perceived that Chinese activities in the South China Sea has undermined their maritime interests and also sovereignty in the disputed waters. But for Malaysia, we keep on downplaying the issues, and we have this tendency to de-emphasize the security risks surrounding China in the South China Sea. And this can be reflected through various incidents in the past. And one good example for this would be the April 2020 West Capella incident. So what happened during that time is that a Chinese survey vessel known as Haiyang Dizhi number 8, alongside with a few Chinese Coast Guard and also maritime militias vessels, was spotted tagging West Capella, which is an oil drilling ship under charter to Malaysian national oil company known as Petronas near our EEZ. So because of our low profile approach, it is expected that our response to this incident was mild, and it was also rather slow. So that also reflects our preference for behind the scene diplomacy in dealing with this issue or manage the South China Sea dispute. So there were no official response from the government in the beginning. And only a few days later, our then Foreign Minister, Hishamuddin Hussein, he issued a press release calling for a peaceful resolution of the situation. And in his remarks, he mentioned both the US and also China. And he also highlighted that there's this risk for miscalculation and also risk for increased tension in the South China Sea. And all this indicates that the Malaysian authorities, they are actually more concerned about big power conflict in the region rather than the presence of foreign vessels near our waters. So I'm sure that some of you might be wondering and might be asking, like, why must Malaysia adopt such a low-profile approach in the South China Sea? Why can't Malaysia be more vocal like the Philippines and also Vietnam? Is it because we don't have such option, or is it because we're not in a position to do so? Well, my answer to this would be no, because we do have this kind of option, given our long-standing defense alignment with not only US, but also other partners, for example, the five-power defense arrangement that we have, which include Britain, Australia, and also New Zealand. But it's just that we have decided to not go into that direction or that path because the situation that we are facing right now is very different from what the Philippines and also Vietnamese are facing. because the degree or the extent of Chinese aggression in the South China Sea that we are facing is totally different. It's not that severe. And that's the reason why our authorities, our ruling elites, have judged that Chinese aggression in the South China Sea at the moment can be considered as moderate for Malaysia. And this is why we keep this very low profile approach, right? And it is true that you might say that I can't deny this, that we do have this increased concern or risk perception towards China because of their growing and also near constant presence near our waters since 2013 and 2014, to be exact, near Luconia Shore. But again, their presence is not to the extent that we see China as an immediate threat. And their activities in the South China Sea has yet to severely undermine our core stakes in the disputed waters. In fact, I would say that Malaysian ruling elites, they are in the opinion that any preemptive move, for example, if we upgrade existing alignment into something that Beijing might perceive as targeting China or anti-China, then the whole thing will be strategically counterproductive, meaning that we are now turning a potential security concern into a real immediate threat, right? And this is something that we don't really want to see, because for us, it would cause more harm rather than gains. For one, by being confrontational towards China, it will not change Chinese behavior in the South China Sea. China will continue to do what they want to do, what they have been doing, and what they plan to do in the future in the South China Sea. Secondly, it will also damage the robust partnership that we have with China at the moment. For your information, China has been our largest trading partner since 2009. And such partnership, as well as trade and investment coming in from China, is very important for Malaysia, not only in terms of our economic growth, but also domestic development, and most importantly, to ensure the legitimacy of our ruling elites. And nevertheless, I would like to stress here and emphasize here is that being low profile doesn't mean that we're actually compromising our sovereignty, or neither we are giving up our claims in the South China Sea, but we're actually doing everything we can to defend our claims and also to preserve our sovereignty in the South China Sea. We did it through the legal way, and we also has been working very closely with our regional partners to boost our maritime capabilities all this while. So Japan is a very good example, where when Malaysia and Japan elevated our partnership or relations to comprehensive strategic partnership in December 2023, what accompanied this upgrade of relations is the signing of security assistance agreement under the OSA program. So under this program, the Japanese government, they will provide Malaysia with rescue boats and then equipment to help boost our maritime capabilities. And the two countries also vow and pledge that, we will strengthen the collaboration between the Japanese Coast Guard and also our Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency. We have been working pretty closely with South Korea as well, and we're actually in the midst or in the process of concluding a defense MOU with the United States as well. But nevertheless, we still, regardless of all these efforts, we still think that we should prioritize in using diplomatic channels as the principal platform for us to deal with China and to deal with this South China Sea dispute. So this multi-pronged approach that we're adopting right now is deemed the most suitable one, and also the most desirable one at the moment, because first, it allows Malaysia to continue to preserve our sovereignty. It allows Malaysia to continue our agency, to exercise our agencies in conducting energy exploration at Kasawari. It also gives our ruling elites some rooms to focus on more pressing domestic issues back home. And more importantly, it also let us mitigate security risks in the South China Sea. For instance, military coercion or even confrontation in the disputed waters. But although I said that, our approach right now is very pragmatic and it served our interests well so far, but as I mentioned earlier, it is not something static. meaning that it will change and it will become unsustainable if China become more and more aggressive towards Malaysia in the South China Sea. And this is a scenario that many Malaysians wouldn't dismiss, be it defense planner, be it government officials or even scholars, especially right after the 16 aircraft incident that took place in 31st May 2021. So what happened on that day is that 16 People's Liberation Army Air Force aircraft flew into the airspace about 40 to 60 nautical miles off our Sarawak coast. They were flying in tactical formation. They were ignoring the instruction from regional air traffic control. So their actions have actually prompted the Royal Malaysian Air Force to scramble our jets from Labuan Air Base to intercept those aircraft. But because the incident has been widely reported by local media, especially those in Sabah and Sarawak, so there's this mild surge of anti-China sentiment that we can observe among Malaysians. And that's the reason why Wisma Putra or our foreign ministry have no other choice but to summon the Chinese ambassador for explanation. And the explanation that we got is that they're telling us this is nothing but just a routine exercise that they're conducting, which is not very convincing, right? Some in Malaysia even suggested that the overflight is actually aimed to deter Malaysia from conducting energy exploration at Kasawari. But regardless of what are the true motives behind that overflight, the incident has certainly increased the threat perception among Malaysians towards China. Why? Because their years-long show of presence near water has now evolved into show of force. And we have no idea when and how the next show of force will take place and how it will be. And we are also concerned and worried whether or not this show of force will eventually turn into something even more serious, like use of force. We're concerned that whether or not China will use force to occupy our claim features in the South China Sea in the future, whether or not they will use force to deter us from conducting energy exploration at Kasawari, and whether or not both Malaysia and China will engage in incidents at sea, especially those that involve injuries and even loss of life. So if that really happened, then that will surely ignite a huge wave of anti-China sentiment among Malaysians across the country. And that will pressure the Malaysian government to actually abandon our low-profile approach and adopt something like alignment-centric approach, like what the Philippines is doing right. So that's basically what I would like to share on Malaysia's approach on the South China Sea, and I look forward for more interaction during the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shahadah, for that very enriching discussion. You have discussed about Malaysia's low profile and pragmatic approach in the South China Sea. But also you mentioned that Malaysia will have red lines, and this approach will not be sustainable in the future if we continue to see China's increasingly aggressive actions in the South China Sea. So let us move on to the next speaker. He has extensive experience and wisdom on the region's maritime issues. Captain Martin Sebastian. He is the founder and director of the Center for Global Peace Solutions, Malaysia. Captain Martin served in the National Maritime Policy think tank Maritime Institute Malaysia from 2011 to 2020 as senior fellow and the head of the Center for Maritime Security and Diplomacy. Captain Martin, thanks for joining us. The virtual floor is now yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone, especially to my esteemed Malaysian colleagues here on the screen. I'm quite proud to see two of these speakers here. I don't think I've met them, but big thanks to Julio and FAX team for inviting me here to speak and give my views. I am, of course, quite close to South China Sea, having commanded two islands there in Layang-Layang and in Mai. During the early days in the mid-80s. I concur with what Dr. Shahadah mentioned just now, that Malaysia has a unique approach But this unique approach, which I divided into three, coercion, persuasion, and cooperation. Okay. Coercion is when we coerce them not to react um, in a very aggressive manner. So this way, we send our ships out, Coast Guard ships, Navy ships, shadow them and this and that. Persuasion is when we are involved in businesses with China on land, like our trains, our big projects with China, Chinese banks are here. If you go to KLCC, around KLCC, you see big Chinese banks there. And of course, we have a huge Chinese diaspora as compared to Vietnam and Philippines, and they make a big mark on the as an economic backbone of Malaysia, Then comes cooperation. Cooperation is where we get our head of states to visit China, shake hands, photo ops, and blah, 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 So these three measures have, in a way, worked to calm down tensions that we have in South China Sea. But then again, I won't say this is done because we are unique, and that's why we are doing this. And that's why Petronas has been able to explore and extract more wells, I think more than 19 wells since the start of the 2002 DOC. And coming back to DOC, in 2002, if you look at paragraph 6, it talks about CBM. And, we have done all that in South China Sea. We've done law enforcement. I personally have put China and Taiwan in the same class for 7 years when I was in MIMA, doing law enforcement courses and maritime search and rescue courses and all that. But all these don't work. It doesn't work with China. China continues to have their wolf warrior diplomacy, their cabbage strategy, their debt traps and all that. So they're a big player, giant player. It's like you're talking about organized crime and you are trying to catch a drug addict, but you need to look at the whole drug industry, You cannot go in blindfolded when it comes to big power games. You need to understand the game very well. So Malaysia, why Malaysia takes this South China Sea game very seriously is because South China Sea is the only place where we get our oil and gas. We have three major waterways, Strait of Malacca, Sulu Sea, and South China Sea. South China Sea is our economic backbone, and that's where all our oil and gas revenue come from. And we, a lot of people look at us as a country, but actually we're a federation of three regions, the Peninsula, Sabah, and Sarawak. So if we were to be too aggressive or whatever, try to do tit for tat, we might draw in some negative forces to intervene into waters that we cannot manage, especially Sabah and Sarawak. Right now, we already have problems with the federation, so we shouldn't be too excited. So it's not because that we are doing these three things, coercion, persuasion, and cooperation, and that we have escaped the onslaught of China. It's also because we are far away. We are all the way down, and the Philippines and Vietnam are so close. And way back in the 80s, we managed to put our forward defense at the 8th parallel where I was there. And we managed to stop any incursion down south. But we didn't know that they will come down to Luconia Shoals and claim it right off our doorstep. So we were not prepared for that. In fact, Tun Dr. Mahathir, when I was there, he did make a remark that we should also fortify other atolls and all that down south. But our great planners said, no, we are already here and I don't think anybody will come down. And now we are suffering the onslaught of that. But having said that, we continue to explore, and as what Dr. said about Kasawari and other oil and gas platforms with China are named in the protests recently. So that only goes to show that it still has her sights on South China Sea. But when it comes to Malaysia, we are quite unique. like I said, unlike Vietnam and unlike Philippines, we have a huge Chinese diaspora. And they're well connected to the mainland, well connected culturally, economically, and all that. So China sees us as a small annex of themselves, you know. And if you look at Sabah, some ethnic tribes of Kadazan Dusun people are actually offshoot of the ethnic tribes in Taiwan. And if you go to Kalimantan and Sarawak, and there, it is the whole of Borneo used to be a Hakka kingdom, you know. So there's a lot of Chinese presence in our land side, you know, Peninsula and Sabah Sarawak. So the Chinese don't see us the way they see Vietnam, socialist Vietnam, and the Republic of Philippines, which is, you know, got EDCA 1 and 2 aligned to US. And they see us differently. So this whole landscape kind of favors us in the way we play these three games: cohesion, persuasion, and cooperation. As Dr. Shahadah mentioned, that it may not be sustainable. Yes, I agree with her that it may not be sustainable, but China is not going to play the same game with us. It will play a different game, you know. It will not be aggressive to us because of these dynamics that we have with her. And they will play soft power tactics with us because they know we are weak right now with the federation. So we have problems, Petronas and Petros in Sarawak, and we have issues now. So China knows that the COC cannot go through because it's not binding. And whatever it does, COC is not going to go through. And so they have started these new discussions with the National Security Council of Malaysia on trying to start a bilateral mechanism. So she's gone to Indonesia, she's gone to Philippines, and try to cut us up into small pieces. You know, this is soft power approach. Cut us up into small pieces, make us, little pieces so that they can chew on us, number one. Number two, as you can see, her aggression, now from domestic, we go to regional, Malaysia and Philippines. The new law that the Philippines have come out with, you know, that Malaysia is, of course, protested because if you look at Articles 15 of the law, which is in my hands now, Article 15 says, Section 15, penal sanctions. Any violation of the rights of Philippines as provided under this act shall be addressed and penalized through pertinent existing laws and regulations. In the absence thereof, any violation shall be subject to an administrative fine of not less than 600,000 US dollars, but not more than 1 million US dollars. So if this law encroaches into Sabah, those operating in that area can be brought to Philippines to face trial and fine. So of course, your neighbor is going to jump, you see. But the irony is, both of us work very well together in Sulawesi when it comes to kidnapping, ransom, and this issue and all that. But when it comes to South China Sea, we are loggerheads. You see these dynamics where politicians play to retain power. But on the ground, we know that we have one superpower facing us in South China Sea, where the traditional security envelope, and here's non-traditional, kidnap for ransom, illegal fishing, smuggling, trafficking, and this is pertinent in ASEAN. In South China, in the Straits of Malacca, we can do this, non-traditional, we can work together. When it comes to Sulawesi Sea, we can work together. When it comes to non-traditional, but when it comes to a state threat, everybody panic, especially in South China Sea. And there are four claimants. So for China, if Malaysia and Philippines continue to go at loggerheads, and also Vietnam and Philippines, Malaysia and Vietnam, this is a very good price for China, for the soft power. We've got to be very careful with this on the long term, as this is the divide and rule strategy. So we need to come together to resolve issues among us. So for me, I look at this space as an estate, maritime estate. You have a huge estate. Why are you not monetizing it? It's just like a land estate. You own the estate, monetize it, work together and monetize it. There's tourism, blue economy, and whatnot. And don't continue to look at, oops, hang on, sorry, something, okay. So don't continue to be sucked into this superpower thing and all that. God-given estate to you. Try to do something. So this is Malaysia-Philippines opportunity that I look at, and also regional. When you look at ASEAN, to me, this is not an ASEAN issue because there are only 4 claimants, which means 40% of the 100 is nothing. If you go for exams, you'll fail. So out of the 4, only 2 are closest to the firepower, and we are all the way down there. So it's about time. When the time comes, China will come in. So some corrections on or rather some clarifications of what Dr. Nur Shahadah said just now. I want to clarify some things. West Capella incident is not that we downplayed the incident. No. The fact is that was a peak of COVID, and most of our fleet were in Langkawi, stopping the migrants from coming through the northern and southern corridors. So we only had a very small group there in South China Sea to face West Capella. And it was a lucky shot for us because our capital ships were not there. And also with the US Marine, I remember United States Marine Corps flagship was there, or rather carrier. And of course, the Australians, you can come in, nothing much you can do. You are on the ship. What can you do at sea to stop somebody unless you go board the ship and punch up somebody else? So all that just died down eventually. It's a show of presence and died down. But our main priority was not South China Sea. Our main priority was COVID. So that's why we did the Op Benteng. If everybody knows, Op Benteng was the maximum force. But then we also failed in Op Benteng because the day we deployed our fleet off Langkawi, 900 migrants landed in Langkawi. So then we realized that these are law enforcement, organized crime syndicates, and military cannot handle it. And it happened twice more than 900 people landed. So coming back to this US, FPDA and all that, we must understand that ASEAN, by majority, we are Muslims, ASEAN. But by member state, we are Buddhists. You know, if you look at Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, you know, those kind of, by member state, we are Buddhists. But by majority, we are Muslims. So these Muslims, Southern Philippines, Brunei, Indonesia, they are very sensitive with US intervention in the Middle East. So it's a long haul for us to have any cooperation with, defense cooperation with US. It will never take on. It will always be in the suspect list. But we will buy ships, like we are buying Coast Guard cutters from the US, you know. We are getting some intelligence support from them, and it will remain at that emblem only. Even the Australians wanted to fly the Gateway Patrol, which they have from Butterworth. They requested to fly it in South China Sea. We said no. So this Western intervention is not going to happen. Malaysia, you know, like it or not, it will still be pro-China in a sense that we have for centuries been dealing with our closest neighbor, which we even sent tribute way back in the 10th century. So when you look at aircrafts flying over, Chinese aircraft flying over, I won't say it's Malaysian SPAs. It is actually the EEZ. We have no control over EEZ. Anybody can fly. They can even come to territorial waters if they want to, but their passage must be expeditionary, must move continuously. They must not stop and take pictures and do exercises and all that. Everybody got the right. If the Chinese want to fly 20 aircrafts, they can fly because the US are moving the aircraft carriers there, and the aircrafts come out like a beehive from the aircraft carrier. I myself have seen that operating. So if the US can do that, Chinese can do that also. So no big deal in Chinese flying, and we shouldn't have scrambled our aircraft. And I think that was a very silly move in making that issue a big issue. Actually, it's a non-issue as far as I'm concerned. And anti-China sentiment is actually played up by politicians. In real fact, actually, it's nothing to do with Chinese aggression or Chinese adventurism or Chinese exertion in South China Sea. No, we have, like I said, a huge diaspora, Chinese diaspora, and we celebrate Chinese New Year and a lot of Chinese holidays and blah, 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 and Chinese food, blah, blah, blah. But then again, this sentiment comes from the fact that we once fought against communists before our independence. But China is communist. So domestically, we are anti-China, anti-Chinese, and we call them communists, but then we go and hug China, Chinese communists. So these are all political games. We should not be sucked into it. So I don't see this big anti-China sentiment. So moving forward, I will say we must continue to hold South China Sea as a very strategic waterway for us, very strategic. And ASEAN must continue to hold China responsible and not be sucked into the COC game that they're trying to divide us and rule us. US, Europe, Russia, Canada, all of them want to come in and so-called, no, we shouldn't go there. And particular attention to Vietnam, particular attention. Malaysia and Philippines should pay particular attention to Vietnam because Vietnam plays the three-phase game. At one point, Vietnam plays with China on the socialist front, big brother, small brother. Then with Philippines and Vietnam, it plays the victim to the other powers that are being bullied by China so that they can get all the funding from Europe, from whoever that want to fund them for capacity building and all that. And then the third phase is with ASEAN. They come and join ASEAN, say, help, people are bullying me, help. So Vietnam runs three phases. So you've got to be very careful. Malaysia and Philippines got to be very careful in Vietnam because they fought a long battle with superpower and they won and they're smart. They know what they want for their country. Economically, they're much better than Singapore already. Their economic reforms are going on quite well. And I think on the long run, they will try to activate the Blue Whale project whilst Philippines is struggling with oil and gas exploration. And of course, Philippines is against Malaysia extending whatever boundaries that we want to extend because it's starting from Sabah. But to me, Sabah is a non-issue. It's a sovereign state. It's part of Malaysia. So all these are played by politicians. So come back to the basics. Domestically, regionally, extra-regional. So domestic, we are very careful of South China Sea because our economic backbone is there. But anywhere else, Sulu Strait, Straits of Malacca, we are willing to work with people. But South China Sea, very important for the Federation and very important for economy. That's our domestic stand. So we continue to downplay whatever tension there. Regionally, we work together with Philippines. We have done very well for the Bangsa Moro. We managed to resolve the Moro issues, being a facilitator for that. Next is create a blue economy in Sulu Sea and make Sabah and Bangsa Moro as some of the hub and spoke entity for the entrance into Pacific. That one we can do regionally. Extra-regionally, we become a member of the global peace and security architecture in the Indo-Pacific outreach, India, US, and whatever. And I think that way our IR can go quite smoothly. That's all from me for the moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Captain Martin. Maritime affairs, security, and diplomacy really requires creativity and is really thought-provoking as various states deal with complex considerations, especially in the challenge like China and the South China Sea. As you mentioned, Malaysia uses a strategy of caution, persuasion, and cooperation with its relations with China. However, you also mentioned that Malaysia has a unique relationship with China as China will not see Malaysia as it does Vietnam and the Philippines. And you also mentioned that China employs the cabbage strategy and that it will try to divide and conquer this claimant ASEAN states. But however, you also mentioned that Malaysia and the Philippines can work together despite other issues and territorial disputes between them, like the Sabah issue, but there's also cooperation between us in the Sulu Sea. So with that, you also reminded us that we can present the South China Sea as an ASEAN issue, even if the COC is not working, perhaps we can find other creative ways to work together within ASEAN. So with that, let us welcome our final speaker, Dr. Leong or Dr. Karl. Dr. Karl is a senior lecturer at the Institute of China Studies, University Malaya. He completed his doctorate with Monash University on the Chinese sub-state diplomacy in China-ASEAN economic cooperation. His research interest focuses on non-traditional diplomacy, specifically Taiwan's quasi-state diplomacy in Southeast Asia, as well as Taiwan Southeast Asia cooperation, such as digital social innovation for climate change, industry based education or training programs, smart cities, tourism, digital democracy, agriculture, public health, medicine, ornamental aquaculture, and aquascape. Dr. Karl was also the recipient of Taiwan Fellowship in 2020, a visiting scholar at Guangxi University for Nationalities in 2018, and Taiwan Fellow at the National Chengchi University in 2020. Dr. Karl, the virtual floor is yours.
Thanks, Forrest, for your kind introduction. Yeah. Before I start my presentation, just thank you to Fax Asia for having me here in this morning. So, and also to Dr. Shahadah for reaching me with Fax Asia and and eventually allow me to have a session on the non-traditional security issues. And because of my background, I mean, basically the non-traditional security issue that has become a mainstream security issue today, and thanks to the first Trump administration, and then the following Biden, and then now come back again with the second Trump administration. Now we can see that this can say somehow the semiconductor AI supply chain has become a supply chain security in itself. You know, this is a security issue in itself. Okay, so but I'm not going to just focus on this supply chain security, but I'm also looking at the economic statecraft or economic technological statecraft, as I always call it in my upcoming book. So how countries within ASEAN region use the current wave of a reconfiguration or reorganization of the AI semiconductor supply chain to do their bidding to upgrade their own industries and therefore their own economies as a whole. So go to the next slide, please. So what I'm going to do today is just a bit of introduction first, and then I'll go on whether ASEAN is going to see a regional integration or whether it's going to see a regional competition among ASEAN countries when it comes to this their you can say supply chain geo-economics overall. Yeah. So in the bigger dimension of the world, now we have this reorganization of this global AI semiconductor supply chain. By AI, it means it's a bigger set, while the semiconductor will be the smaller subset within the AI. So it's basically they are basically two supply chains. They are quite interrelated with each other. Yeah? So of course we know that it started with the US-China trade war and then continue up into after the COVID pandemic. We've seen US and China mire in trade war at first during the first Trump administration, and then later on subsequently went into this tech war during the Biden administration. And now we have seen we have seen a lot of measures, export ban, investment restrictions, even multilateral cooperation, to ban China's access to cutting-edge chips, equipment, software, etc. Of course, from China's point of view, this is also not legal, and it responded by banning raw materials to the semiconductor industry, doing its own stockpiling and buying through the third parties or entities. And we've seen that recently, the news about Singapore and Malaysia, government investigating the issue about some AI, NVIDIA's AI chips being ended up in companies such as the Chinese companies such as DeepSeek, and it has now rattled the market today. And of course, in the industrial actors, this is more of a micro. For businesses, they prefer a shorter and secure supply chain to provide this kind of their seamless goods to the American market, especially. Friendshoring, the two terms, the preference for manufacturing facilities in geopolitical allies, and nearshoring means basically to invest closer to investors' countries of origin. So overall now, within this AI semiconductor supply chain today, a few ASEAN countries are important exporters of semiconductors in the world. Next slide, please. Okay, click one more time. So the first one, I have the reason why I want to do this presentation with some slides, because I want to also share some very important statistics here. So in 2023, ASEAN's top export categories by value to the world included electrical machinery and equipment, so basically electrical stuff. And from 2018 to 2023, ASEAN semiconductor exports increased 41.6%. It's a whopping figure. So from this 189.9 billion to 268.8 billion US dollars. And another one, in 2023, ASEAN's share of global semiconductor exports was 23.6%. So it's about equivalent to a US dollar of 268.8 billion. So of the total semiconductor export value will be 1.14 trillion overall in the world. Next slide, please. So, and a bit information, the statistics about the global semiconductor supply chain today. This is a semiconductor supply chain. I have another slide on the AI semiconductor supply chain. So the upstream level, we have mostly the US, the American, we call it IC chip design companies, or IC chip designers, or IC chip design houses, whatever they call it, they say the same. So 86% from the US, so chip designer. And then the second will be Taiwan with 12%. The midstream, we all know with the entire news today, TSMC, TSMC, and TSMC. So basically, in less than 10 nanometer cutting edge chips, Taiwan is number one with whopping, I mean, you can say it's a monopoly, 90 to 93% of the cutting edge chips here. And if you consider all other chips, including the legacy chips and others, and the legacy chips and the advanced ones, so Taiwan now occupy about 73.7%. Through several companies there. Taiwan is number one for chip making. This is the midstream level. South Korea used to be number two, but it will be number two in terms of company base. But in terms of countries where the company coming from, China is now getting about 9.6% of it. So this is the midstream level. And then downstream level, we have this IC assembly, packaging and testing, or we call it the market used to term it as OSAT, outsourced semiconductor assembly and testing. So this is the packaging testing. 50% or more than 50% forecasted will be still with Taiwan as number one, and China now increasingly becoming the second player in the downstream level. So we have seen upstream, midstream, and downstream. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we have seen the semiconductor as supply chain. There was a semiconductor supply chain per se, and now we have entered into this AI supply chain. So it's not just the chips we are talking about. We are talking about others, the racks, the servers, the subsystems such as the wiring, the cooling system, etc., which are used. All these are used in what we call as the AI infrastructure today. So they are used in the big data centers. So altogether, NVIDIA's occupy about 88% of the global GPUs, the graphic processing units. They will be needed if that data center needs to do AI, needs to achieve AI level of functions. So that is NVIDIA's 88%. So another 12% will comes from this AMD. So another American company. And of course, because of NVIDIA's background with AI supply chain, it has a very strong Taiwan's suppliers, a list of Taiwan suppliers altogether. So all these Taiwan suppliers occupy about 78% of the NVIDIA AI supply chain. So they occupy 78%. In other words, 78% of NVIDIA's supply chains and suppliers come from Taiwanese companies such as Honghai, Foxconn, Quanta, Eventech, Wistron, Vivint, Gigabyte, and of course now I also added in ASUS is another server vendor. So altogether they're doing different parts of the AI infrastructure needed by the AI big data centers, yeah, around the world. So basically they're using NVIDIA's NVIDIA products, but the products are actually manufactured by the Taiwanese suppliers. Okay, next slide, please. So now, coming back to ASEAN. So I put in a few slides here just about each country's now what are they doing now. What I see is that altogether countries are competing vigorously, fiercely on getting the right so-called the right investments, the high value-added investments, semiconductor investments coming, or AI investments from overseas. So we have Singapore now. We have this basically the existing base of many chip makers. If I'm not wrong, about 6 of them today, and this is, I think, Singapore has the highest value-added or highest rank semiconductor industry in the whole of Southeast Asia. Okay, all these are known to the world. High-skilled international workforce, R&D talents, strong industry academia, collaboration, IP protection, reliable financial system, stable business environment. But the problem is Singapore is that it is lacking the land. It has a pressure on massive electricity use because every foundry or the chip making company, chip making factory, if they want to establish something like a factory there, they need to have a very massive consumption of electricity and water, and it must be pure water. It cannot be simply any kind of water per se. Yeah? So this is same thing, pressure on the pure water use as well. So Singapore overall aims to secure TSMC investment and solidify position as the chip making hub in the whole ASEAN region. So a lot of measures been done, the refundable investment credit, in enterprise innovation scheme, this finance and treasury center, all these are very, not just for the semiconductor companies, but also for wider companies at large. And of course, there's also this kind of financial sector incentive scheme that offers tax rates ranging from 5 to 13.5% for those companies coming in, foreign companies coming into Singapore. Next, please. So previously, Singapore was the 4th largest exporter of ICs and parts thereof. Now Malaysia is the 6th when it comes to these exporters of ICs and parts thereof. So basically Malaysia is an indisputable player in the downstream. We already have our own set of companies or our own ecosystem in the IC assembly, packaging, and testing. We have also a limited wafer fabrication base, our own company called Silterra, being relied upon by the previous Mahathir administration to become our Malaysia's own TSMC, But that was the old days, yeah. And then we have Taiwanese companies like Global Wafers, and then we have also a group of IC design companies, which in recently Malaysia AMIO is Silicon Vision. So the Silicon Vision itself is a cooperation with ARM for IC design architecture. This is all to build up our own IC local design companies to become bigger players than they are now. Of course, with English educated local workforce, business environment friendly, we have a lot of incentives given to the companies there. But the thing is, the disadvantage of Malaysia's competing for the semiconductor investments is that there's a highly concentrated, basically the whole semiconductor IC assembly, packaging, testing hub is in Penang. They're highly concentrated in Penang. Penang itself is a small state. It lacks the land, pressures, of course, on the use of electricity and water. And now, recently, we also seen the interstate competition from the Selangor state, my state, uh, for a slice in the IC design. So it became a very uneasy relationship between these two states, especially. There's also lack of technical manpower and R&D talents. Yeah, this is I think this is the most important factor. The first important challenge for Malaysia, because we have a severe brain drain, which most of our good, even very high quality engineers, they like to go to Singapore to work. And of course, we have inadequate industry academia collaboration. Basically, the whole aim for Malaysia is to achieve the Made by Malaysia vision. It's part of the Silicon vision as well. So this basically, Malaysia is actually eyeing to build the entire supply chain of semiconductor. We also, one of the ways is to attract the chip makers to come to Malaysia to build the chips here, to manufacture chips here, and then also we're also pushing for the vertical integration in the ASEAN region. So the measures, like I say, stem from as early on as this national semiconductor strategy. It was unveiled last year, and earmarked about 25 billion to implement strategies and incentives. Now, of course, we have IC design parks in Selangor and Penang for that. We're also building cooperation with the global south and Brazil, especially, and now recently India for IC semiconductor cooperation, whether it's to cultivate talents, diversify the market. Basically, it's still in the early stage. So, and then of course, cooperation with the UK's company ARM Holdings for the IC design architecture. So the Silicon Vision itself actually stems out from the Malaysia's earlier document. This National Semiconductor Strategy. So this is now what we are here for. This is what Malaysia is doing today. Okay, next slide, please. Now Vietnam will be our Malaysia's biggest competitor overall, because Vietnam has a lot of supply chains within its shores. Because they have Samsung supply chain, the Korean one, they have the American one, Qualcomm, they have the MCO, they have Infineon, etc. So basically, and then recently they have NVIDIA's supply chain as well coming in. NVIDIA also coming in to build the factory base we call it AI factory in Vietnam. But the problem, of course, with Vietnam is the lack of English-speaking manpower. Of course, they are still doing a lot of work on strengthening this industry academic collaboration. Of course, again, we also inadequate alignment of business climate with international standards. So to become a semiconductor powerhouse, it has to align with the international standards. Overall, Vietnam aims to be the global semiconductor leader by 2050. Now Vietnam is the 11th largest exporter of ICs and parts in the world. So the measures will be very ambitious. Target 50,000 to 10,000 IC engineers, bigger than Malaysia's target of 60,000. We have other tax breaks, corporate income tax. Having this rate of cooperation even with Japan, the US. Also, we have this training of this semiconductor training. Taiwan, also fast track visa applications. Land water rental exemptions, they even come up with a single window in semiconductor AI and E&E investments. I think the most important one nowadays is the 25 industrial zones being earmarked by Vietnam, to build all the entire Vietnam. So the Saigon High Tech Park is something that we should closely monitor, because it will be big. Because as I heard about, nowadays there are a lot more foreign semiconductor companies going to this Saigon High Tech Park as well. So next slide, please. Okay, Thailand, another one. It's a reputation as a printed circuit board PCB maker. Basically, it's a low-end manufacturing maker. It has a robust infrastructures like Malaysia as well. Availability of foreign migrant workers. This is This is what they have, but it's trainable industrial manpower. They have this international aligned business climate. Again, the problem with the disadvantage with Thailand is the lack of English-speaking manpower, massive investments needed for this semiconductor AI industry because it doesn't have a very big ecosystem in itself. Technologically weak, lack of political stability, but overall, Thailand aims to become a key semiconductor player as well. Right now, Taiwan is the 13th largest exporter of ICs and parts thereof. So they're setting up semiconductor board to supervise and attract semiconductor investments. For others, there will be tax holidays, front-end investment, semicon investments given 10-year tax breaks, back-end semicon investments 5 to 8 years, tax holidays, machinery investments, again tax holidays. Most importantly, they're also cooperating with the semiconductor powers, notably Taiwan in a special package model for talent training and investments. There are also companies manufacturing active and intelligent packaging, may qualify even for tax holidays as well. So next slide, please. So this is an important, this is a very interesting, I would say, not just important, but very interesting map. They say, you see all of the company, all of the Southeast Asian countries, they are actually vying to be part of this semiconductor or AI supply chain, but mostly a semiconductor supply chain. Like from Vietnam itself, I say one country itself, Vietnam has 70 talent training programs with Taiwan. And why Taiwan is the most important here? Because among all the semiconductor powerhouses, Taiwan is the most advanced in terms of architecting their own or implementing their own semiconductor diplomacy. So they have, this Vietnam and Thailand is recently Thailand is much more of a recent case. Vietnam is the much more long-standing case. So Thailand came in last year with a updated bilateral investment agreement with Taiwan in order to rope in Taiwanese semiconductor investments. Of course, Singapore, we have attracting TSMC itself. Indonesia wanted to become a semiconductor power, but so far it had not been able to gain cooperation from Taiwan so far. So it's a target country for semiconductor talents. And the Philippines, yes, and first of all, I have to congratulate Philippines for being the first in Southeast Asia to host this Taiwan's industrial zone. So it's a clear winner, although Thailand and Vietnam mounted a fierce competition. But let's say this industrial zone in the Philippines is more focused on the clean energy. So it's not yet a semiconductor industrial zone being established by Taiwan in the Philippines. So the game is still open for all Southeast Asian countries to bid for the Taiwan industrial zone here. And of course, the Philippines has been also actively seeking cooperation with Taiwan in this sense as well. Next slide, please. So we have seen the competition more than the supply chain, more than the integration that I mentioned earlier. But Malaysia still intends to build this supply chain integration through its ASEAN chairmanship this year. So like our Deputy Trade Minister stipulated, vertical integration is important. So basically his view is that Singapore occupying the top in terms of the top place in terms of complexity, Malaysia in the middle and Vietnam in the bottom. Okay, so he also asking Malaysia to develop vertical integration with South Korea, but it wasn't really forthcoming from South Korea as well. For Vietnam, our Prime Minister even articulated his willingness to cooperate with Vietnam in the supply chains. Our Trade Minister even went to Brazil with our Prime Minister, looking for the semiconductor cooperation with Brazil for that market diversification purpose. And in the middle of it, the Biden administration has imposed these two rules before the Trump administration took over, and this is foreign direct product rule, which affected the suppliers, equipment suppliers, chip making equipment suppliers from the third countries like Malaysia. And Malaysia is also part of this tier 2 of this AI diffusion rule. So we cannot use more than 50,000 NVIDIA's GPUs for the span of 2025 to 2027. So we are somehow being capped the limit of that. So that will for those big data centers that uses AI functions, this will be a disruption in itself. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so in the middle of it, the Brazil, I say, Malaysia looking for cooperation with Brazil, and then in the middle, and after that, when Trump came in, he signs a reciprocal tariffs, which we will be expecting in April 2, and recently, they also Malaysia looking to be part of India's semiconductor industry. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm almost done with my approach here, with my Malaysia's two-prong approach here. This ASEAN chair itself, as ASEAN chair, now Malaysia is going to establish a very ambitious goal to establish this ASEAN Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC summit. So it's a trilateral summit. So this our foreign minister even called it a trilateral alliance. Okay, so the reason is that GCC tapping on the GCC as a capital-rich region, providing the capital, China as providing the market, and ASEAN providing the base, the resources and development potential, the base for the semiconductor or even higher or even other high-tech investments. But ultimately, it will be very up to the semiconductor investments here. And our Prime Minister even asking, revealing that Malaysia, these trilateral parties were going to kickstart negotiations on a free trade agreement, supply chain integration, cross-border investments. This is the first prong. You know? The second prong is, of course, in the short term, now Malaysia is lobbying the US to have a special summit with ASEAN to discuss the tariffs coming from President Trump. So basically, it's a negotiations also as well. The problem is that countries like Vietnam already approached US bilaterally much earlier on. So it still remains a question whether ASEAN can negotiate as one entity with the US, or will it be several countries negotiating bilaterally with the US on the tariffs. Okay, I have one. Next slide, please. Okay, the conclusion. So for overall, the regional competition among ASEAN countries stands out. So it's not we can see more competition rather than integration at this moment. So competing ASEAN countries trying their utmost to attract semiconductor and AI investments, try to build with semiconductor AI powers ASEAN countries. The immense trickle-down effect and also transformational to the entire national economy if these top companies coming to these Southeast Asian countries to build their factories in, that will be what ASEAN countries, separate ASEAN countries are looking for. But how about the regional integration? So the regional integration is up to Malaysia this year to prove that whether this ASEAN GCC China cooperation or what Malaysia call the wider global South cooperation really workable during this ASEAN chairmanship. But there's no clear indication of who's going to be this, let's say, semiconductor tech provider. For example, who's going to be the chip maker within this trilateral partnership. And then the other thing is the missing tangible cooperation with stronger semiconductor AI powerhouses. This is also been alerted by our former Deputy Trade Minister. So basically, he's asking Malaysia not to just do it on its own. They have to look at how Malaysia can harmonize with the semiconductor AI powerhouses of the world, the US, Taiwan, South Korea, because they occupy the highest streams of supply chain. Because Malaysia is over at the lower end, we can do as far as things can get us to. So this is what his argument is. And then the other is semiconductor AI giants, private companies are also in the midst of reconfiguring the entire supply chain to suit their needs and interests overall. So this is another things that's still evolving today. So basically, that's my presentation today. I hope to have a lively discussion with the participants as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karl. Your presentation highlighted ASEAN's role and ASEAN being an emerging player in the semiconductor AI industry and its increasing importance to the global stage as it affects security, economy, development in the region. There's also a need for cooperation with Taiwan, you mentioned, in this aspect, and this has been greatly highlighted in your presentation. Malaysia will have a critical role to play as an ASEAN chair to lead the region towards integration when it comes to the semiconductor AI industry. At its core, sustaining meaningful cooperation requires mutual understanding and a bit of strategic maneuvering. And let's face it, Malaysia and the Philippines have a long history of collaboration, but they also have a few twists and turns along the way. But they will remain key players in shaping ASEAN's future. I truly appreciated our speakers' thought provoking views for today. And I think that the participants will also have some questions. So we can now proceed to the open forum or the question and answer section. To our participants, you may post your questions in the Q&A chat box. Meanwhile, we have gathered some initial questions from our registration. So I guess the first two questions will be addressed to Captain Martin Sebastian and Dr. Nur Shahadah as they deal with maritime security. So the first question is, how can Malaysia and the Philippines leverage their bilateral defense agreements and multilateral partnerships to strengthen maritime domain awareness, counteract illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and gray zone tactics in the region? And then the second question is that given the increased military activities of external actors in Southeast Asian waters, should Malaysia and the Philippines push for a more robust ASEAN-led maritime defense strategy? And what would such a strategy entail? Dr. Shahada, Captain Sebastian, when you're ready.
I think Dr. Shada, you want to go first?
Captain, you can go first if you want to.
Okay, I'll go first as requested. Now, Malaysia's dependence for marine resources in South China Sea is not from living resources, unlike Philippines. It's non-living, oil and gas. Okay. Now, if you look at fisheries in South China Sea with regards to Malaysia, we have no control. There's no control. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what we don't know. That's the best part, if I can say. We don't know what we don't know. But when I was 3 years with United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime as a consultant, and 3 years with the Global Fishing Watch, I can tell you what's happening in South China Sea when it comes to fisheries. Transshipment ships are buying fish from illegal fishermen, which includes our fishermen. And our fishermen are also fuel suppliers, subsidy fuel suppliers, which they take from Kelantan, Terengganu, and they sell it to foreign fishermen. And it's a big business. This is organized crime. And most of these fishers through these transshipment ships are going to Thailand. That is why Thailand can be the largest exporter for Europe and US, and they export to premium markets. Funny, because Thailand has only the Gulf of Thailand and Andaman Sea, and some extension of their foreign-going fishing fleet, and 70 million population. Whilst we have half the population, and we have Straits of Malacca, South China Sea East, South China Sea West, and Sulu Sea, and we can't even feed our own people. Funny, isn't it? Ironic, isn't it? So something fishy about fisheries in Malaysia. So there's a huge organized crime activity, and the Malaysian authorities are some of the main culprits, especially Lembaga Kemajuan Ikan, the Fishery Development, and the Department of Fisheries. And of course, the battle is between management and enforcement. The enforcement blame the management blame the enforcement. But the problem is the area is too vast and you cannot have continuous presence there. So whilst we safeguard oil and gas, our fishery is gone. And we lose multi-billion dollars. And surprisingly, we also have tuna, which is taken by Filipino fishermen off Gumusut Kakap area, high-price yellowfin tuna, some skipjack, and these are high price. But we are not a fishery nation, unlike Philippines. So when it comes to fisheries, I think we need to do a stock assessment study. How much fish are there actually? And how much are edible and non-edible? We need to look. Protected species, ornamental species, edible, export. If you don't eat in your country, catch and export. Simple as that. But we don't have a fishery assessment. We don't have a maximum sustainable yield stock. Of course, they had the digital ASEAN digital catch database, something like that, sponsored by US, but everything gone bonkers because of deep corruption between the agencies that are supposed to safeguard fisheries. So sometimes many of the watchers in South China Sea says that one of the reasons that China is not aggressive to us is because we have let go the fisheries to them and we safeguard the oil and gas. So it's a win-win situation because we are not so dependent on fisheries. And most of the time, most of our fisheries are coming from the West Coast because the West Coast, the western seaboard of the peninsula are the ones that are most populated, most infrastructure, and we get it from Indonesia. And we don't even fish. We buy it from Indonesian fishermen. So the East Coast, if you look at the East Coast, they only eat river fish. If you speak to Malay local domestic people, they will say in Kelantan, Terengganu, they eat catfish and river fish and all that. They are not actually deep sea fishermen. So where does the South China Sea fishers go? Where do they go? Nowhere. They actually lost to transshipment, and we are losing billions of dollars there, and nobody will talk about it. So this is where Malaysia and Philippines have to come together, do a stock assessment, maximum sustainable yield, find out how much stock is actually there, how much can be replenished, and how we can together do industrial fishing. I don't mind if we can make a pact with Thailand, and certain fish we don't eat, we catch together and give it to Thailand and ask Thailand to sell for us. And even the 5 terumbus, the 5 atolls that we have taken since the 80s, I think it's about time we convert them to become fishery stations. And they become all the atolls that Kalayaan and Terumbu and all that. It's been militarized for so long and we are not getting any return of investment. Might as well they become fishery stations and become a haven for our deep sea fishermen. And if they become havens for deep sea fishermen, then the fishermen themselves will become eyes and ears for us for any incursion, encroachment, intrusion, blah, blah, blah. So these are the areas. Also navigation. So that's one. When it comes to Malaysia, you cannot get into the defense part because we only have agreement, like what Dr. Shahadah mentioned. Agreement, arrangement, not agreement. And this arrangement is just cosmetics. No one is coming to the defense of Malaysia for anywhere, because if war breaks out between the China group and the US group, I don't know where Malaysia is going to be, China group or US group. I don't know where we're going to choose. So there's not going to be a war. That's why I say, if anybody is dreaming there's going to be an all-out war in South China Sea, I think they have to wake up from their hypnosis, because the adventurism for resources and space is not going to happen through war. It's going to happen through soft power. Okay, that one. So if you talk about what's the second one? First one is IUU fishing. The second one I missed out. What was that? Second question.
The second question is should Malaysia and the Philippines push for a more robust ASEAN-led maritime deterrence strategy, and what would such a strategy entail?
I would say that we go for the low-hanging fruit lah. Okay, low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit is mass rescue operation. Mass rescue. You look at the Sewol ferry. You look at, if there's a cruise liner that passes through South China Sea and it capsizes and it sink, people who are living inside the ship will also die when the ship capsizes and sink. We don't have the technology right now to stop the ship from capsizing, and we don't have the technology to go in and rescue the survivors and bring them out. So we start with that first. Mass rescue. We've got large number of people actually in cruise liners. We got refugees and all that. So we go for that first. I tried for 7 years to address this issue. It went for a while, but then after that, we need to make some legislation that ships with cruise liners and all that, they need to provide their plans to the agents if they somehow or other capsize or being hijacked or whatever, that we need to go in and rescue these people quickly. We should stop the ship from capsizing. That means we need to put all the flotation chambers around it as soon as possible, because once it capsizes, there's no way of going inside, and once it starts sinking, it's a living death for those people who are trapped inside. Okay, I think we must start one by one. Then we go for disaster relief, those kind of stuff. Go for the low-hanging fruits first, get everybody to cooperate together, then slowly go for law enforcement. After law enforcement, then only go for military operations and all that. You cannot jerk straight away to military operations. We go for HADR to law enforcement, then go to, we must schedule people to. Sometimes things are technically correct, but politically not feasible. You see what I mean? You and I may think, technically possible, why don't you do it? No, but politically not possible. So technically feasible, politically not possible. So these kind of things can only happen when you start from low-hanging fruit. Get people to work and all that. Even Taiwan, China want to come in, like MS-370. Taiwan was operating adjacent of China, searching for MS-370 in South China Sea. It can happen. But if you don't practice, and it should not be knee-jerk simulation. It should be continuous, because the why I say that is, if you do knee-jerk once in a year or something like that, the people who actually took part in the simulation will be the turnaround time. They will be gone if the next real incident happen. So we should use AI now. Should do simulation in respective areas, and then simulate it in a central. Maybe Philippines become the central part. Everybody else simulate from their own countries, and we work together little by little. I don't focus too much on the superpower rivalry. Make the maritime estate something that we can get return of investment, and something that we can use instead of too much focusing on superpower rivalry, but losing our fish. Eventually, the oil and gas will be depleted. So we really need to think collectively of the maritime estate.
Dr. Shahadah?
Yes. I totally agree with Captain Martin that we should start with the low-hanging fruit. Yeah, there is this increase of external military activities in this region, and whether or not Philippines and Malaysia should push for an ASEAN-led strategy to manage this. The reason why I agree with Captain Martin is that it would be very difficult for us to push for this ASEAN-led strategy because of few reasons. One is that, in the South China Sea, we are very divided. Some are claimant states, some are non-claimant states. So basically, our interest and our agenda is very, very different. And it's very difficult for us to unite everyone and to come up with this so-called ASEAN-led strategy in this. And secondly is that we do have different approach in how we want to deal with, different powers in the region, right? And some might welcome external involvement, some might not. So that's another obstacles that we need to think about. And another thing is that, like Captain Martin mentioned, technically we can do that, but politically it will be very difficult. For instance, between Malaysia and Philippines, it's very difficult for us to really work closely in terms of this, because Philippines does lay claim on Sabah, and this is something that our policymakers have in mind every time whenever we talk about sovereignty and stuff like that. So I think yes, we start with a low-hanging fruit first, but then it would be very, very difficult for us to actually push for this ASEAN-led mechanism or strategy to manage the situation.
Okay, moving on to the next. set of questions. This ones might be actually best answered by Dr. Karl. From our participant, since Malaysia is one of the leading semiconductor exporters in Southeast Asia, what best practices can the Philippines learn from Malaysia in order to improve its semiconductor industry? And another one is, what policy changes might be necessary in Malaysia and the Philippines to attract more semiconductor investments?
Oh, okay, it's actually interrelated. The questions are quite interrelated with each other. So just answer all of them in one shot. So the most important thing is for for a country or nation trying to become a semiconductor powerhouse is it has this critical mass. This is from experience of Korea, experience of Taiwan, experience of US, etc. US will be you can see it from the Silicon Valley, the example itself. So the critical mass is very important. The critical mass comes from several parts. One of these is enough local companies coming up with their own businesses in the semiconductor industry. So the country also needs to have these local companies, enough numbers of them. And then the other is enough talents. These talents nowadays, we have to distinguish between these two talents in this sense. They are those from the vocational or technical talents. These are not really the ones that are going to do the R&D in the semiconductor, but those doing the R&D are actually the engineers, which are the PhD graduates, master graduates. So we have to have two kinds of talents for the semiconductor industry. So having one vocational or technical talents will not be enough. So we also need to have enough talents. The number of them must be big enough. So that's why you see Malaysia have 60,000, engineers by 2030 something that, and then Vietnam also have the 50,000 to 100,000 engineers. So this is a talent. So this is a second part of it. Of course, because once you have these two parts of it, then the critical mass will be built, and the critical mass itself, you can construe it as the ecosystem. So the ecosystem will be self-sufficient. It can go along its own lines to cater its own market. So because the markets are there, so you can also do this. So you can also have this enough the critical mass, you can sustain the entire semiconductor industry for a particular country, because this critical mass will be used to tailor to let's say service or even to subcontract from the MNCs, the multinational corporations coming from overseas, the semiconductor corporations from overseas. This is what Malaysia's experience is. We have that. So the multinational corporations, they're actually building the local companies, or we call it the anchors. You go to Penang, you will see the different companies like Intel anchoring several local OSAT companies, and the same goes to Infineon, the same goes to Bosch, etc. So the same thing, they have their own groups of local companies. So this is how the entire critical mass being built. That's how Malaysia solidified its position as at the downstream of the semiconductor supply chain. So this is the Malaysian experience. So, and the Philippines can really start thinking about that. And to add one more information, the Taiwanese government actually mapped all the 6 countries plus India's semiconductors industry, say E&E, not really semiconductor, but E&E, electrical and electronic industrial structure. So they know where are the deficiencies for each country. For Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, etc. So all of them. So Taiwan has already mapped that, and that map is actually quite very, let's say, strategic, and in a way very detailed. So they know which part the particular country is lacking, and which part they need to boost up. So this is a situation that we are having right now. So okay, so this is my answer to the first question, and the first and second question together.
All right. I would like to ask another question from another participant, which was messaged to me. This question is for Captain Martin and Dr. Nur Shahadah. Earlier you mentioned about an ASEAN-led deterrent strategy probably not being a viable option in the South China Sea. What about minilaterals or ASEAN minus X or only involving the claimant states? Do you think that this would be a better act strategy in dealing with the South China Sea disputes?
Well, there was a question that I observed from just a minute. Kurt, I think Kurt Abalos, Kurt mentioned about Malaysia and Philippines having a EEZ arrangement. So I mentioned just now about transshipment, factory ships coming and buying. We call it fish laundering. Fish laundering is when you have fish that have been legally caught, and then you buy fish that are illegally caught and you mix them together and you package it and you sell it to premium markets. So these are called fish laundering. So Malaysia and Philippines can actually try to work together to identify these vessels, transshipment factory vessels, and those feeders to these vessels, and track them down through international organizations and find out where these markets are, where these fishes or these transshipment products are going to which market, and start talking about sanctions. The second one is live fish trade. Live fish trade is where they catch this expensive fish like leopard grouper and all that, and they put in these huge drums, plastic drums, and fill it up 3/4 with water, and then they connect these drums, like 20 of them, through a certain rope, and that rope is connected to one long rope which has a float. So the mothership will send off the smaller ship to go and hook on to that float, which has a hook, and they slowly drag this drums to the mothership, and these products, this live fish trade, actually go to premium restaurants in Taiwan and Hong Kong. And these fishes are caught off Philippine waters and Malaysian waters also. So we can work together, like what I said, low-hanging fruit first, get this EEZ cooperation to identify factory ships, transshipment ships, who are fueling the ships, where the ships are operating in. So you can work together with the external agency, like fly a drone that can be out for 6 hours, 12 hours, and carrying the data within it. Then when it lands, you take out the data bank and fix it to the AI receiver, and the AI receiver will pattern and give you a 1 week breakout of where these vessels are, their operating area, their movement, and then Malaysia and Philippines can set up a joint commission to actually address this issue at the international forum and take these developed countries to task and say that you are buying illegally laundered fish from our area. So you only talk, but you no action. And those kind of stuff we can do. At the same time, like I said earlier, we can also do the fish stock assessment, maximum sustainable yield, so that we don't catch fish links, small fishes. We make sure that the fish can actually breed. We don't overfish. And also we can address illegal workforce at sea, forced labor. So low-hanging fruit is easier to work on. There's no political issues there. There are a lot of good technical issues. There's no political restriction. You see what I mean? Something that law enforcement can also help, military can come in and support. So all these can be done through technology with the AI support. AI can be used to ensure the military and the law enforcement can come in the same page to identify violations, and so that we can go for successful conviction. So we try that first, and then we go for slowly other things. Like I said earlier, we go for disaster relief, preparation for mobilization, timely response for disaster relief. Then we go for law enforcement. Once we are quite familiar with all of each other, there's some what shall I say, easy wins, and we can report it in ASEAN forums. Everybody will look at us and say, hey, there's something going on there. Let's work more. And then of course, you can get some funding for that, and it will be more precise to actually come out with good success story when you have successful conviction.
Dr. Shahadah?
Yes, I think minilateral can be an interesting option, but then it depends on who are the members, and also provided that by having such an arrangement will not be perceived by China as something targeting China, because that would be counterproductive and jeopardize the whole thing. And for Malaysia, I think we're still prefer to have it at the multilateral level through ASEAN. And we're also exploring bilateral dialogue with China in terms of this. Well, some of the people in Malaysia or even media, they say that, by having this bilateral dialogue with China, meaning that we're playing the Chinese game, right? Because of the power asymmetry and etc. But then for me, it's not, because it shows that we actually prioritize cooperation over confrontation. And it's very important for us to actually talk to one another, because our ultimate objective or aim is actually to have peace and stability. So how can we have peace and stability in the region if we're not talking to one another? So I think that's my short answer for the question.
All right, that's very interesting. I think from the Philippine perspective, we have explored that bilateral side a long time ago, and it's not working. So we're trying other options for the Philippine side. So perhaps this will be the last round of questions addressed to Dr. Lee from our participants. Yesterday, Malaysian government announced National Economics Command Center. What can we expect from the center for the semiconductor field in Malaysia? And also one that relates to ASEAN, um, whether ASEAN should create a unified semiconductor plan and assign states for certain parts of the value chain to maximize and efficiently distribute FDIs.
Okay. For the first question on NGCC, right, the National Geoeconomics Command Center in, yeah, the one unveiled by the Malaysian government today. So, yesterday, I think, yes, that I think for the Malaysia's semiconductor strategy, we are more or less very clear now. So regardless of this NGCC unveiling or not, but this NGCC is more of a okay, promptly, to urgently tackle the issue coming from Trump's tariffs. Okay, this is the thing. Yeah. For this thing, I think for this particular issue, I think Malaysia can do a lot more than just NGCC, because now more or less now I can see the Malaysian government is still adopting this wait and see attitude. Uh, for example, our Vietnamese counterpart has already sent one whole delegation to the US in the middle of March. So they already approached the Trump administration, the Trump team, when it comes to their tariffs. So is there very we can actually also send in a delegation as well. So we can do a much more proactive bilaterally, not just multilaterally. So this is one thing I hope Malaysia can do more in this sense. And for our semiconductor industry, we actually we already have a very clear strategy. Like I said before, we have our national semiconductor strategy, NSS, and then later on we have this our silicon vision itself. So the silicon vision itself is we are aiming to be one of the made by Malaysia's AI chips within 5 to 7 years. It's very ambitious program. So we don't have a AI chip maker at this moment. Where you can see from you are in the midstream, we are basically absent in the midstream of the global supply chain. So Malaysia aiming to become one, and it's not just the normal chip, but it's the AI chip that we are aiming to be, to have one. We are going to design ourselves. We're going to manufacture the chip there in Malaysia, and then we also package and test it in Malaysia as well. So it's all one whole. It's ambitious one whole supply chain kind of goal. So this is a very ambitious altogether. Again, ambitious. So like our prime minister is asking everyone to join in the fray of the semiconductor, our semiconductor endeavor. So that everyone can contribute with it, because this needs only not just the industrial efforts, it needs the entire nation's effort to do this. Okay. Yeah. So basically, this is the second my answer to the first question on the NGCC, and the second one will be the vertical integration. Is it the integration among ASEAN countries? The industrial where ASEAN countries can take different roles within the entire supply chain. Yeah, it is a concept that has been put forward by our Deputy Trade Minister on and on and on for the past 2 years. It has been on like this for 2 years. So now Malaysia's having the chairmanship this year. So it's really up to Malaysia to persuade our ASEAN neighbors to join this, because ultimately no country in the world wants to become the bottom of the industrial supply chain. It doesn't look good nationally. Become a bottom player of the supply chain. Every country wants to become, strive to become the higher end, the upper player, or at least the middle player in the supply chain. So you can see even Indonesia is trying to rock in this semiconductor investments in itself, although it doesn't really have this ecosystem, but wanted semiconductor investments nevertheless. So this is a situation the ASEAN countries in, right? It's same with the traditional security. ASEAN is quite divided. ASEAN countries quite divided alongside on these things. The same for semiconductor strategy today, because every ASEAN is, from what I see, every ASEAN is playing its own bilateral game. Many ASEAN countries like Vietnam, something like Vietnam, we has a bigger option than Malaysia. So Malaysia is exploring this ASEAN GCC China option. So, and this eventually, the only full-fledged semiconductor player in the ASEAN GCC, China, it will be China itself. So, but Vietnam is also has the option of working with the Koreans, and also importantly with the Taiwanese as well. So these are options that our neighbors will have more than Malaysia. So Malaysia has to do a lot of job in persuading, in lobbying our ASEAN neighbors really to join this ASEAN GCC China cooperation, because ultimately every ASEAN country has its own ideas of how to develop their own, how to rope in, how to ride the wave of this semiconductor investments coming to Southeast Asia.
All right. For the last part of our Q&A, I know that we have discussed maritime security, the semiconductor industry extensively today. And I would just like to ask for your final words when it comes to Philippines-Malaysia cooperation, perhaps ASEAN as well, when it comes to the evolving regional challenges. Dr. Shahadah?
Yeah, again, I think the answer will be back to we can start with, less sensitive area for collaboration between Philippines and Malaysia because of the factors that we have discussed earlier. Yeah, we start with all these non-traditional security issues first, and then only slowly we move towards to how we can work together in terms of our law enforcement agencies and etc. But before we end the session, can I say a few things or response to Captain Martin's comment earlier?
Of course, of course.
Yes, I remember Captain Martin mentioned about the 16 aircraft thing. Yes, it's true that they're flying above our EEZ and it's not our airspace because it's like 40 to 60 nautical miles of Sarawak. But I think it's important for us to have this concern about this incident because it's not about whether or not they break into our airspace, but it's the message that they wanted to send. The incident happened just before we undertake or conduct our energy exploration at Kasawari. So it's the message that they send, like they're trying to tell us that, they can harm us if they want to, things like that. And it's true that, some of these things about China and anti-China sentiment, those are played out by politicians. We all agree on that one. But the thing is that, they still manage to get buy-ins from some segment of the society and also our community. So that's something that we really need to be careful about, because we know that we are multiracial, multi-religion, and having that would actually disrupt racial harmony. And about whether or not we should go to the West, or work closely with the West for defense cooperation like the US. True, I totally agree that we have this sensitivity towards US, for example, because of the Gaza issue. But still, we also have this distrust towards China. Many of us. I know the ethnic Chinese, they might have better understanding because of their cultural and the linguistic, familiarity with China. But the majority of the Malay population might not share the same sentiment. I think we should not only work very closely with China, but we need to work very closely with other partners as well, and not to put all eggs in one basket. And that's why we're now hedging between, all these big powers. And yes, West Capella, I totally agree that that's the time where we're struggling with the pandemic. It's totally true, but I still think that even without the pandemic, our response will be subtle and it will be mild, because of the factors that you mentioned just now. We have a huge number of Chinese diaspora in the country. We don't want to, raise anything that will disrupt our racial harmony. And of course, we don't want to appear to be confrontational towards China because of our robust economic partnership with China. So I just want to add some comment on this one. Thank you.
Captain Martin, your final words?
I think we have a great opportunity here with regards to Sabah. I think many people don't notice this. You see, of all the states that we have in Malaysia, Sabah is the only one that is facing the Pacific. And if you move out from the east of Sabah, you will see on your left side, Mindanao. On the right side, you'll see Sulawesi. And when you pass these two, you are in Pacific already. So if Sabah is made into a proper hub, and Mindanao and Sulawesi as spoke, we are looking at San Diego, San Salvador, and Santiago, through the Pacific Islands. But we are not looking at it as a maritime estate. We are not looking at the penetration and using Sabah as a stepping stone. So now that we already have Bangsamoro there, and for the last 4 years, no kidnap or ransom issue, we should start moving towards stabilization and raising the economic profile of this tri-border area. And with Kalimantan, now with Nusantara coming to Kalimantan, you will see that the new capital is going to be on Borneo for Indonesia. So Sulawesi Sea is going to be a very strategic waterway like Straits of Malacca. And if you see Straits of Malacca, there's only one capital adjacent of it, which is Kuala Lumpur. Singapore is down there and Bangkok is way up there. So with Nusantara off Sulawesi Sea will become a very important waterway. And if Straits of Malacca reaches to Indian Ocean, Sulawesi should connect to the Pacific. You see what I mean? So I think this is where Philippines and Malaysia come in to boost this entity and to move towards Pacific Islands, which is not so looked into seriously. And there's vast opportunities there, from blue economy, from tourism, from this and that. And also because of coral plateau and fragile ecosystems there, and we have the Coral Triangle Initiative in that area, Philippines and Malaysia can actually come out with proper legislation on safeguarding the marine environment there. Those are go for low-hanging fruits, achievable things. And from that, we develop the cooperation. And once we develop that cooperation, we develop the trust, develop the confidence, then we start moving further and further up. We have done very well during the kidnap for ransom issues. We worked very well in performing the Bangsamoro, which means we can do great things if we put our efforts together. And we should move on, which means what is the next dimension for Bangsamoro? Now that Bangsamoro is there, what's the next dimension? What is next? What is the next dimension in Sulu Sulawesi when Nusantara comes there? What is the next dimension for east of Sabah? We need to look at it very closely. That, to me, is the pillar of Malaysia-Philippines working relationship, Sulu Sulawesi Sea and the tri-border area. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Karl.
Okay. I think we are in a bumpy road ahead with the in terms of this international political economy. I can see that Malaysia has one term and 1 year. I mean, 1 year, one entire year, to show its own to show a different pathway, alternative pathway for ASEAN countries when it comes to this geoeconomics. You know, so navigating these geoeconomics today. So it's so this is up to Malaysia to do something, or whether it can really achieve what they want to achieve. You know, what level does Malaysia want to achieve within this whole year? Because ultimately the second year, next year onwards, will be another ASEAN chair. So we don't know whether this Malaysia's plan will be executed by the next ASEAN chair. So for Malaysia, I think we have really to make sure that if the plan is tangible, it has to be put in within the ASEAN document. Or if not, then I think the next ASEAN chair will may likely not going to follow suit with what Malaysia has started this year.
Okay.
Florence?
Thank you so much, Dr. Carl. Unfortunately, we have reached the conclusion of today's session. On behalf of Fax Asia, we express our gratitude to our esteemed speakers and participants for this very enriching discussion. We look forward to seeing you at our future events. If you have questions or concerns, you can reach us via Fax Asia official social media accounts, facebook.com/FaxAsia on Facebook, and at FaxAsia.org on Twitter. You may also visit our website, faxasia.org, to stay updated on our projects. Before we end, may we also ask a few minutes of your time to please answer the post-event survey in the attached link in the chat box, or scan the QR code that is flashed in your screens. To those who require certificate of attendance, please be informed that you would need to accomplish this evaluation survey. Once again, this is Florence Gamboa. Terima kasih. Maraming salamat.